We met before it.
Yes, I'm sure we have.
Today's almost as much control.
We got.
Read the.
It's gonna be here and then Margaret's just.
Margaret and Sunday will be on here. And then Natural Soccer.
You live by this guy.
Yes.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Margaret, how's the sound? Can you hear us?
Good, thank you.
We're just gonna grab food for a little bit. You know how that goes. So we'll be.
Well, tell me everything you're eating so I can enjoy it vicariously.
Have you had mobetas?
What?
You had mobetas?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
mobetas. I can give you the three options so you can choose what you want to salivate your mind over.
Okay, that sounds good. Hey,
Sunday, we're just gonna be a couple minutes. We're just eating real quick and then we'll get started.
that's fine. I'll do other things until you're ready. I can't hear you, Kenna. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I am muted, but you were here, that's fine, right? Yeah, I'm just gonna mute while we eat and then we'll come back.
Okay.
I got this.
I remember, I think it was 96, Vanity Fair coming out with you on the cover. Yeah. Where just before A Time to Kill. Yeah. It was before A Time to Kill. Yeah, her pictures. Yeah. And I think, was that the first time ever someone who wasn't a big star had been on the cover of Vanity Fair?
Someone told me that, I don't know.
It's only as a reader, I was like, who the hell's that? Because like, you always knew who it was.
No, it was sort of, I'd been in films, and you brought up one of my earlier Days Confused before, but that was the first time that over a weekend, my life changed.
We didn't get started since we have to leave early. So welcome. It's good to finally see you. I don't think we've ever had a meeting together, have we? No. So it's good to see you in person. So Margaret is on online, and so is Sunday. And Angela wasn't able to join us tonight. Her mom's been having some struggles, and she needed to be with her mom tonight. So, but we welcome Margaret and Sunday on the.
Yeah, are you hearing us okay, Margaret?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why don't we go around the room? I know most of us know each other, but why don't we go around the room and just introduce ourselves and maybe your experience with Orem City. So we'll start with you, Reed.
Reed Farnsworth, and I've lived in Orem off and on since the early 80s. I have several kids, taught school here for several years, and just get involved in all kinds of volunteer things. And so when this came up, I jumped at it.
Well, thank you. Great.
Where do you live, Reed?
I live 2 blocks northeast of here.
Very low. This is my second time living in Orem. My first time was in the 90s, living up in Northridge, and back for 6 years, and just getting involved in Orem's growth and development, having seen that in many other places around the world.
Jeff Lamson, I grew up in Orem, just a few blocks north of here. And lived here my whole life.
Just one of our city council reps.
Dana Bauer, grew up in New Jersey till I was 19. And I've been here 35 years this time. So just like to keep an eye on what's going on. I'm a retired nurse.
Which neighborhood do you live?
Levi.
Mark C. Strand, I've been in Orem a long time, so moved when I was just a year old. I had a lot of say in that. I said I wanted and I've been here ever since, except for a 2-year stint. And so I've seen Orem grow from when in elementary I would walk to Geneva, where Mountain View High School is. No problem crossing Center Street, didn't have sidewalks. So got to the orchards and walk home. It was safe to do that as a 2nd, 3rd, 4th grader. Also went to school at Westmore for kindergarten, 1st grade. So it's a great place there. It's going well. And been on the city council for a couple of years. I'm going to try to stay involved. 12 years. Only 2 years matter. The rest.
I'm David Bolton. I lived in Heather, the Heather's area. Grew up in Wyoming, came to BYU, and as my wife and I say, we couldn't figure out where else to go. So I'm here in Orem for 25 years. With our kids here. I spent a few years on the planning commission, and I'm enjoying this one as well.
Sorry. Don't worry about yourself. I'm Karen McCandless, and about 30 years ago, we finally had enough money to buy a home, period, and we bought one in the Timpview neighborhood in Orem, and that's where I'm still at. I lived, like I said, lived here anyway 30 years. I love Orem. I also have the opportunity to serve on the Orem City Council.
Well, I'm Ken Matthews. I'm the community services manager here at Orem City. I've been here for 3 years. I'm an Orem girl. Mostly was raised here, went to Orem High, Cascade Elementary, and Orem Junior and Orem High. Unfortunately, now I live in Vineyard, but still an Orem girl.
I'm Brent Sumner. I live in Orem
almost 73 years, but I'm not gonna tell you how old I am. I published the weekly for 30 years, one Chief Times, and then I went to UVU and retired down there. Get on city council.
Stephen Downs, worked for city, deputy city manager, worked for the city. Been here 7.5 years. My wife grew up here. My wife's, her families are Stratton's and Clegg's. Clegg's settled in here, Stratton, to one of the 7 families in Warren. So they've been here many years. She grew up right by Costco, Hillcrest, Lake Ridge, Orem High. Her parents still live in the home. Her mom is Reva Bowen, who is the Herald, who worked for Brent for many years and covered the city for the Herald for a long time as well. So, anyways, that's me.
Margaret?
I'm Margaret Black, and I've lived in Orem 43 years. And we raised our children here in Kenna's neighborhood. I represent Canyon View, Orchard, and Cascade neighborhoods here. And I've served in the past in many ways in the community, including serving on the city council and as a neighborhood and action chairman.
Thank you. Sunday.
Hey, it's so nice to be with you guys. I grew up in Colorado and we've lived in Orem for 9 years, but my husband is an Orem boy, born and raised here in Orem. And that's why when we looked into moving back to Utah 9 years ago, we didn't look at homes very much further than Orem, and we're raising our 5 children here, and we just love Orem and are grateful for every opportunity that we have here.
Thank you. And Grant?
My audio working?
Yes.
He's going to present, so we don't.
All right, there we go. I'm back in my virtual persona. I'm Grant. I'm one of the senior planners here. I've been here just 2.5 years. Master's and bachelor's degree in planning, and responsible for the neighborhood plans and housing and lots of other things here at Orem.
Thank you, Grant. All right, well, we're gonna give you updates, a few discussion items, and then we're gonna use the bulk of the night to talk about housing. So we'll get to that point in just a minute. First of all, I need a motion to approve our minutes for our last meeting. We have not met since April 15th, which seems like it was later than that, but it wasn't. So can I entertain a motion to approve the minutes from April 15th? Thank you. I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. We just wanted to give you an update on our neighborhood improvement team. Many of you had heard through some of our discussions that we have moved our neighborhood preservation unit, which is our code enforcement. We've moved that out of our police department and we've moved it into my department. So we moved it into the city manager's office in my division under community services. We have hired 2 new civilian, we're calling code enforcement officers. We're calling ourselves the neighborhood improvement team, or the nitwits, as we're calling for the nitpicks. I don't know. The nitwits. And we also retain one of the police officers as our police liaison. So he's working in both departments. So he works in our department, he also works in the police department with some duties. Now is Brady Andreas and us that you probably worked with before. It has been going very well. We were able to obtain a new code enforcement software. It's called Comcate. And we are in the process, of implementing that. It's not fully implemented, but we are using it. And according to Brady, we have done more cases in the last 3 months than they did all year last year. More warnings and citations and so when we first started, we had 40 active cases plus some also in the process when we first began. Right now, I think we have 100 and just looked at the list, like 140 cases either opened or in the process. So it is going very well. They're, one's name is Rory, one's name is Gary. Rory is 6'9". Gary's not that tall. They look like the twins from the movie Twins. We laugh a little bit because, the police officer is supposed to go out with them when there's, a situation where they might not feel at ease or whatever. And we're like, okay, because Brady's not as that tall either. So, but Brady's been great to work with in the transition, and everything's going really well. So we're very excited about that. And we're just kind of taking a wait to see approach to see if we need a third officer or not. But we're doing well. So we encourage you as district leaders, if you have any complaints, please send them through 311 or 801-2297-7000 or on.org/help. That's the best way. Instead of calling us directly, it's best to, so we have record. That record is then will be at some point downloaded into our software program. Right now it's come to me and I assign them. In the program, but it helps us track those. So we're trying to get everyone to really use that system. So they can call 311 unless they're in Sunday's neighborhood, and then they'll get promo. So don't do that. And then, or it's really easy, just call just the 229-7000 number, or just even you can even chat it in. I had someone chat with him the other day. So we just want to do our best. We're calling it compassionate enforcement. So we're doing some mostly reactive enforcement, but some proactive enforcement as well. We really want to do it with compassion. So we want to, definitely enforcement, definitely making sure things are happening, but it also gives us an opportunity to be helpful if we run into a situation like for our Day of Caring project for United Way this year, we have a single lady that lives not too far from here who had gotten in a really bad car accident about a year ago and hasn't been able to do much in her yard, and a neighbor complained. And so we were able to go for our Day of Caring project and go over with our employees and clean up her yard. And so that's a really nice thing. We have had a long-term problem in Brent's neighborhood. Long-term problem in Brent's neighborhood, but.
Come on, Brand.
It's been like 73 years.
It looks like they've been collecting for 73
Is the
years.
governor still complaining about his neighbor?
Yeah.
It's next door neighbor.
Yeah.
But,
Let me just tell you, Kenna and the team has done a great job of that. We've been concerned about it for 30 years, 20 years, really. So it's a good system.
Is that the rental across the street or something else?
it's a
Oh,
whole.
no, that's another problem.
Okay.
But if you
I
run-
haven't told her, but.
Yeah. But if you run into nuisance issues, so we are enforcing nuisance issues. If they're criminal in nature, they still need to go to dispatch. If you don't know if it's criminal, you can send it to us and we'll give it to Brady to go on from there. So, and we're working with planning, working with business licensing, so we're all trying to work together to better enforce some of these issues that we're having in the city, so that we'll have a better city. That's what we're doing. Any questions? Okay.
Great job.
So I'm going to turn the time over to Stephen. We want to maybe go further with enforcement, and Stephen's going to talk about that.
One of the issues, and you've probably seen some of this, that we've run into is we have all kinds of codes that we can enforce on the outside of the property, but some people are living in conditions that are unsuitable to live in, and we don't have the jurisdiction to do the inside because it's generally a health issue. Therefore, Utah County Health Department. So there is a state law, it's Chapter 22 of Utah State Code called the Utah Fit Premises Act. And it requires landlords to keep the home to some minimum level of standard, and it's generally all health, right? Running hot water, working heat, electrical issues are being resolved, things like that. Well, the Utah County has generally not enforced anything in this arena. Salt Lake County does, Davis County does. So we've engaged in some conversations with the Utah County Commission, as well as we're meeting with the Utah County Health Board on Monday, just to start having a discussion about what can we do on the inside of the homes. There was one in our neighborhood actually just recently where mother, 4 young kids, she got pretty sick. And so she had to go to the hospital. So some neighbors actually stepped in took care of the kids. Well, when they went in the house, no short of 100 mice, easy. Mice droppings on kids' pillows, on food, on everything. Well, the landlord that owned this one owned the next door one. And so when we were dealing with this issue, we found out from the neighbors is, well, when the last person moved out of that house had the same issue. And those mice just scattered everywhere else. So same landlord, both properties. I recognize that it's rare that there's landlords that are keeping houses at that standard. However, we are very limited, well, almost completely limited as a city to do anything about the inside of the house. However, young kids are living in these conditions, right? And we've probably seen that maybe somewhere in our life as well, people that we may know. So we're engaging in a conversation about what can we do about that? Because that is impacting neighborhoods as much as what's happening on the outside of the home, and at times even more. So anyways, there is no intent here to get nitpicky as far as cosmetic type things that a tenant may like. This is health and sanitation type issues that we would be working on. So meeting with the county to start a discussion about what do we do so that those that represent the worst of the landlord population aren't dictating the story about all landlords and what landlords are like. Most of them don't do that. However, it's not just a one-off thing that it happens more. And in a situation like right now, what some have called it is it's kind of like the payday lenders of landlords, where they have a very vulnerable population that they rent to, who are in their mind, they're questioning, well, should I just be glad to have a roof over my head and just accept the conditions that I'm living in because I may not have another option? And they're fearful of doing anything. And so that's what we're out to try to help make better. And we need to work with Utah County because the local health board has the jurisdiction in this. And so we have to work through them to do it. So please, David.
Full disclosure, I'm a landlord.
Yep.
Not all those conditions you describe aren't always the landlord's fault.
Correct.
I have spent the last literally year repairing a house that was destroyed by its tenants.
Yep.
It's cost me $25,000. Same kind of things you're describing, feces, all kinds of stuff. So I guess I'm sure there are landlords that cause problems, but there are some
Our victims.
they're victims of their tenants.
Yep. No, I think that's a fair point to keep in mind as we go.
Steve, we had a neighbor in another neighborhood that I was in where in our religious community, I was assigned to visit with them frequently, and they would never let me in. But we just had to have a friendship outside of their home. Finally, the mother died. It was a mother and her daughter that were living there, an adult daughter and an older mother. And when the mother died, the daughter then allowed us to come in and help her clean it up. It was similar to the house you're talking about. We literally had to tear down the walls, all the non-load bearing walls, all the carpet, and rebuild the house from the inside out.
Wow.
And so the point there is that it's not always rentals.
Right.
They can be the homeowners that just are incapable of taking care of it or unwilling.
Yeah, good. Also a good point. So yeah, I think these are things that we definitely need to keep in mind. But the intent is to create a program that is one sustainable in nature. So this isn't what I don't anticipate is, and this would be a county decision, but any type of proactive where they're going to do regular inspections. It's just going to be complaint and only kind of going after the most egregious of issues. So the one I was describing, there was definitely some things that the tenant were doing to make it worse. The issues they were up against were holes in the wall, holes in the floor where they come out. But there's a responsibility on both ends. Sure. Of that. So yeah, great. Thanks for bringing that up. So anyways, we have that meeting on Monday. Again, it's just kind of a discussion of, well, what do we do? The county doesn't believe they can launch a full, go 100% all in on this issue and force us all over the county, which is understandable. However, we can probably start somewhere. That's what.
And the good premise ordinance really is like health safety, so it's running water. you know, making sure landlords have running water, make sure they have heat,
Toilets,
cooling, toilets that are working. I can tell you, being the director of Habitat for Humanity, the whole goal of Habitat was to get people out of substandard housing. And one of the things that we did when people applied was go to see what the situation their housing was in it. That's how me and Karen met, actually. We used to do that together. And I can tell you that some people are living in some pretty terrible conditions, and you can tell if it's the tenant's fault most of the time versus the landlord's fault. You know, and often in Habitat, one of the point that we would judge, we would have to kind of, as part of the thing, judge somehow someone took care of their home. Because if we didn't, we'd end up with the same problem in the Habitat house. So that was something we learned very quickly.
Right.
Well, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Margaret?
Steve, what is the ultimate goal here? What are you hoping for?
Yeah, I mean, in a rental situation like that, it would be that the landlord they wouldn't be able to continue to rent their home if they haven't taken care of these issues, right? If they're not fixing their toilets, if they're not, they don't have heat that's working, they wouldn't be able to continue to rent the home.
And how would that be enforced?
Well, that's what we're working on, right, with the county, is what does an enforcement mechanism look like? Is that them delegating to our inspectors to go in? Is it them? That's what we don't know yet. We just know there's an issue. We don't have the solution figured out yet.
Okay.
So,
And then the other question is, if it's the fault of the renter,
yeah,
then that would be a whole nother line of enforcement?
yeah, those are, answers we don't have yet for sure, things we'd have to work through. But yeah, I mean, the landlord wouldn't be held responsible for things that are purely the tenant's responsibility, I would guess. But a situation where the toilet doesn't work because of what the tenant has done, I don't know how that works. But again, we definitely don't have the solution yet.
So does having some kind of an eviction
Protection.
from a landlord standpoint, do they need help? Not only cleaning up their property, but getting a problem moved to a place that's more suitable, or would it be more healthy?
Yeah, that's another great example.
And maybe that could be one of the things. Some help in getting a renter that's causing problems in a choice that the renter can have a better.
And that would, I mean, they're in, as far as I know, in an okay place now, and it's through, frankly, it was through the LDS church that worked out. But
Yeah.
it would be good to be able to do that through the city as well.
Yeah, if we use we were to use any federal funds to enforce with or anything like that, where there is some rules around, you know, evicting a tenant or displacing a tenant, there's some rules around that as well that we've had to look at. These are really good points we hadn't even thought of, so thank you. Whatever you still want to bring it up.
Yeah.
So that's
Another question. So if we had a situation where the landlord was, you know, not providing basic necessities, and then we went in or county went in and wouldn't let them rent anymore until they improved that, do we have a mechanism in place for the family that's living there? Because like you're saying, sometimes they're worried that they don't have any other options. Do we have facilities in place, or are there options that we can say, here's some temporary housing until we get this situation taken care of, so that they're not out on the street?
So there is, through utility agreement, we've met with utility legal services as well. There is like an enforcement procedure, like if you were to have, say you're a landlord, I mean, you're a tenant and your sewer isn't working, there's a process that a tenant can go through to force the landlord to do it. But usually what will end up happening is the landlord will evict the tenant if they're not at some times, it just depends on. There's some really, I mean, we have wonderful landlords. It's those bad apples that make it hard for the good apples. Steve, I can tell you. All right, well, we want to spend the next hour-ish or so talking about housing. Marie, Karen and I were just in a chamber event yesterday. We're talking about the economy and housing. We were also in a poverty summit today, and they were talking about housing. There's been several articles in the last 2 or 3 weeks about housing. Housing is becoming a real crisis in our community, here, nationwide, and even worldwide. And so we wanted to, one of the things we tried to do pre-COVID was start to talk about housing and how Orem, what should Orem do to make housing better for people in our community? And we had a affordable housing summit that some of you came to, and then we had some charrettes that we did, where we were looking at different housing types and things that maybe we could to help some of the problems that we're having with housing. And that kind of went on the back burner because of COVID. And so we're kind of wanting to start those discussions again and kind of see where we can go with these discussions. And so I've asked Grant to lead a discussion tonight about housing. He's going to go over some facts and figures, and then Stephen and I will help lead that discussion. But we just really want to have a good, positive discussion because we want to do what's best for the community. We want to do what's best for people in need in our community and what's best for everyone. And so we just want to have a really good, positive discussion tonight about housing. Does that make sense to everyone? So we'll turn the tower to Grant in his beautiful park side. And he can start with that.
I have an entire park in my office. It's pretty cool. Let's see here. Let me make sure I can.
Yeah, you want to talk.
Times are good. I may need to give you some rights. Okay.
Okay. Is my slide showing now?
Looks good.
Great. So as Kenneth asked me to kind of review this, I pulled some slides together and just wanted to preface some of these slides historically kind of with how some state requirements and how as a planning division we've how housing has been part of the conversation in the past. So before 2019, every other year, the city was required to do a biannual housing study. And so our most recent one was done in 2018. And so a lot of the data that I have is from that study because we did pull some data down recently from 2019. The margins of error are larger. And so a quick kind of data science 101, I think I've mentioned this in the past as I've presented to some of you. Data 101 is if you have a large margin of error, usually we'll try to not report a lot of statistics off of that data because it's not as reliable. And so with the census being last year, we're waiting to update a lot of our demographic data and some of these housing data that we have from that more reliable data. And so the numbers you'll see, some of the numbers I present today are from that 2018 study because that was adopted as part of our general plan. Subsequently, 2019, there's legislation I'll talk about here a little bit in a minute. At the state level, it requires cities to adopt a moderate income housing plan that addresses kind of a menu of options that's supposed to be one element to tackle that the state legislatures looked at to tackle affordable housing in 2019. So the city has subsequently, we're required to report how we're making progress annually to the state on those goals that we've made. There's kind of a menu of goals that the city staff can choose from to show how we're, anyways, to show how that, so I'll talk a little bit more about that. So that's a little bit more kind of as far as the numbers. We're waiting for the census numbers to come out later this year. Early census numbers, we have some projections, or not projections, but for redistricting purposes, those have been released. So we do have some population, those have been updated. You go to orem.org/demographics. We talked about that kind of in our other previous meeting, our neighborhood leaders meeting. But so just some data things really quick before we start. So housing affordability is the elephant in the room, I think, for myself and a lot of my friends and family and members are directly affected by this. A lot of my generation is affected by this, and many others in our community. Oops, it's not moving. There we go. You know, when we talk about affordable housing, it kind of has some weighted jargon that goes with it, and kind of a de facto standard from HUD and typically best practices for lenders as well. If you're going to get a mortgage, that's usually within household can attain it within no more than 30% of the household's gross income. One of the things that I did want to kind of interject here is we talk about housing. It's not you don't just talk about housing, because when you live somewhere, you're going to get there. You get there, you get to work, you go to school, you go to recreate. And so kind of transportation and land use housing are connected directly. And so I think that's part of this discussion. But we're going to focus more on housing tonight. Affordable housing doesn't necessarily mean large multifamily. There's lots of different housing types that allow for different densities, and medium density townhomes, small duplexes, triplexes, accessory apartments, or single family homes. And we'll talk about tonight too, there's some other what we call missing middle housing types that have kind of just been lost to time and other pressures from the market and from housing. And why does this matter? High housing costs reduce disposable income, which means families with modest incomes can have less to pay bills, buy groceries, and other necessities. High housing costs prevent people from spending money at local restaurants and spending the money in the local economy, and it can push families into homelessness. Then a lot of what we've seen, I think, recently too is these are some main sectors of people who are affected by this. I think now that because the housing market is the way it is, it's affecting more than just, but these are just some sample. Before COVID and before the housing market was more, as aggressive as it is now, and the house prices, I think you saw that traditionally this is also has always been kind of the case where school teachers and service workers and public safety officials, others are usually affected by the lack of this housing at a lower scale of price. And these are some just definitions from HUD. And these are numbers, like I said, pulled from 2018 estimates. So individuals making less than $12,000 per year, so that's 6% of Orem in 2018. Low wage workers making less than $29,039 per year. So that's less than 50% of the area median income. That was 12% of Orem's population. Households making less than $46,000, which is 80% of the area AMI. AMI is area median income. That's 24% of Orem. So that's a quarter of Orem is that kind of target. Less than 69,000, which is 80 to 120% of area median income, and that's 22% of Orem residents. So then kind of so that we take some other target numbers that we look at, households below the poverty level. And so that's $312 a month. I don't think anybody can even get close to that. Low wage workers, housing is affordable for low wage workers must be less than $726 a month. Now again, these were 2018 numbers. These are much higher now. We've seen some recent reports from rents just going up. Housing affordable for low income families must be less than $1,162 a month. And then moderate income families, $1,700 a month. So here's just a quick slide. I didn't want to go through a lot of data tonight because data is interesting, but for some people it's not interesting. And so I will show a link where to find the housing study and all these other things that I'm sharing tonight. So one of the pressures that's been studied in Salt Lake City Metro, Wasatch Front area the last 5 years is that we have a housing problem because we haven't been building enough housing. But I want to also make a note that we can't just build ourselves out of this problem because there's other factors that are creating this problem of not enough housing. But this targets that specific item of that we can't just build more housing. One of the issues why we can't build ourselves out of it is because it's my 2 more slides. So I'll get to that in a second. So lack of supply, supply and demand, lack of supply, high demand. So as of 2018, 24.6% of moderate to low income households in Orem are paying more than 30% of their monthly income towards housing. And so that's, 6,700 households living in unaffordable housing. And what other impacts does that then have on other, like we talked about earlier, kind of what the local economy, pressures for parents to both work, daycare implications. A lot of times when you add on the transportation cost to these over cost burdened homes with housing, the budget is all of a sudden over 50 to 60% is just housing and transportation. And so then you have other areas that households can't have to pinch. So what I was going to get to before with the limitations to building ourselves out of this is there's lots of issues, impediments to affordable housing, but also just housing, more housing. Lack of funding. Right now, I think for specific affordable housing projects that are for, housing that can be for those lower incomes, land costs are so high and construction costs are so high, materials costs are so high, labor costs are so high that the developer will look at the numbers and it isn't, cost effective for them to want to pursue that. But I think there's an alternative to that. One of the other issues is current zoning. There's limitations on density, there's limitations on housing types, there's limitations because of lot sizes and minimum square footages. There's development burdens potentially. One of the ideas that has been kind of closely looked at the state legislative level is kind of floated around is, can cities work with developers more on impact fees or some areas within other development burdens to speed up the timeline and approval process for housing projects. There is neighborhood resistance that I think there's just a fear of what the future will be different, and there's some misconceptions that low-income housing is a detriment to a community, to economic development, and other misconceptions about where to put it, where should it go, where shouldn't it go, and so there's all these things I think that just create this kind of black hole that we just get sucked into that holds us back and from moving forward with different ideas for housing. So what has the Orem done? So I say we've met these requirements in the past as a planning staff. We have the largest university in Utah in Orem. So I think we have just a natural kind of supply and demand as a result of that, then you have this housing market on top of that. It's exacerbated the issue. But this is what we've done. We have student housing developments. We have multifamily developments in the past. We have accessory apartments. That is now a state law. That went through this year. There was a state law that said any single family home could qualify to have an accessory apartment. Before, we were already definitely on top of this. At the state level, we had the most accessory apartments in the city and in any other city before this law. So we were already an early kind of model for accessory apartments. And because we have a university in our city, the state law had certain kind of criteria that did change kind of how the focus on how many we have to provide. So we can, because we already have that in our city, we already have an extra burden of supply for accessory apartments because of a university. We have a senior overlay zone that is targeted specifically at affordable housing. Actually, they have to submit a yearly report of how much they're charging and how much the rents were, how much rents were. We adopted the State Street Master Plan and the mixed use districts, and we've had those housing meetings, and then we're doing this housing for a moderate income housing plan for the state every year. So that's this. It's required to, like I said, be reported on every year. There is some interesting kind of thing is that we're supposed to ensure adequate housing opportunities for people of various incomes. And so we do have to try and show that the city is moving forward with regards to housing that can provide it for everybody. So there's the strategies, like I said, there's a list of menu of goals. So we are trying to implement 3 or more strategies, and because we have a front runner station and public transit, we're required to actually have 4 minimum. And then the annual reports are due every December. And so we're about to start the next report for this year. Recommendations. So as we've done the studies, as we've had these meetings, as we've had consultants help with us some of these reports, we've had lots of recommendations from all these different meetings. The Affordable Housing Summit that we had in 2019, the charrette that we had in 2019. I'm going to share some of those here in a minute. But these are some other housing recommendations that have been, either accomplished or has been suggested that or have been explored at the state, local, national level. And so you can read those. I don't want to read my slides, but I think one of the ones that I did want to focus on, I'm going to go into here in a minute, is this missing middle housing. So the average house size now is very large, and one of the things that has been researched is in the last 20 years that house size for a starter home has grown by 20, 30, 40%. So the smaller homes back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, are not nearly as large as they are now. And so because of the construction, land, and other costs, that minimum house size is now so much more than what it would have been. And there's other factors as well. But so here's some missing middle housing types, and we share these at the charrette in 2019. We've just been gathered from different communities, tried to kind of stay I would say high scale regional to the Western United States. But these are different housing types that we've received feedback from these meetings on to explore these. And these have also been explored at the local level in other communities in Utah. and have been adopted and approved for in certain areas. But like accessory dwelling units that are detached, so like a maybe not a strictly compact tiny home, but kind of like a miniature cottage. Townhomes of different types and styles, tiny home parks in different communities. There's one of those going in Salt Lake City here in a while. A quadplex or quadplexes, or sometimes they're called also cottage courts, where they have kind of they're a little bit kind of a uniform courtyard, and they're kind of encircle the courtyard. Close, really compact, almost townhome style, but they typically how this works is the minimum height is a certain height, but if they do certain things, then they're granted to go a little bit higher because of XYZ. They either provide public amenities, some other things. So let me switch screens really quick, and I just wanted to go through one more kind of two more screens. One is where to find our housing studies that I've referenced tonight. And then second, I'll share a list of ideas that was from the residents who came to our last charrette. And then Keno, I think we'll just open it up to discussion after that. So let me share my other screen. Okay, so here we are on forum.org, and it's our long range planning page. This has all the long range plans. So at the very bottom first is this moderate income housing reports. And there's the Utah code reference. And then there's the report. So the report from last year shows the strategies and our executive brief summary. And then if you want to get into the nitty gritty, then you can go through and read how we're trying to address these strategies from their list of the goals. So that's the first report. That's that requirement every year. And then there's the older report that I was referencing the statistics from. This was the moderate income housing study that was done in 2018. And this was the previous state requirement for every biannual report that was done. But this was done really, has a lot of really robust statistics in it. So there is a statistical element to the new report that shows our statistical breakdown for the city. So some differences. Sorry to go. I don't want to go too fast, but I did want to kind of summarize this really quickly. And then this is the general plan page, just showing that the moderate income housing study was adopted as part of that, and has some brief statistics on the website there. So let's see here, and then I'll switch over to this other screen. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, so also, the charrette we had in October 2019. So we split it up into tables and had people just brainstorm together about what ideas can we use to talk about housing, and try to, and no idea is a bad idea, but there, we can just work through innovative ideas, different out of the box ideas. And so this is what everybody came up with. And so I just want to, I'm not going to read all of them, but I thought some of the highlights were make accessory apartment process easier. That was also part of, interesting, that was also kind of part of this state-led effort as a tool for affordable housing to try and make more homes accessory apartments. So I think that's been done. Rental caps, that's a little more difficult to do. It's funny, interesting that this was mentioned in 2019, and then now we are seeing kind of telecommuting be a major factor in some communities. If you haven't heard, there's this new term called a Zoom town, and where people are actually not restricted to live where they, geographically close to where they work. Then they're moving to these places where they maybe always wanted to live, or that meets more of their lifestyle, and they're able to then Zoom into work, and potentially maybe have to travel once or twice a year. I've seen this myself. My sibling of mine is going to be able to use up to 3 weeks a year to work remotely, and so he's looking at, that's going to be, potentially when he comes back to visit a family, he can just work remotely and doesn't have to use vacation time, and so I'm really seeing some impacts, and there's already been some interesting discussions and studies about how is that impacting some of these more rural communities. But I think we'll see that there's impacts to that on transportation and I would say housing, even in Orem. We can't stop growth altogether, because I think that's just not the nature of where we where we are in our economy. Inclusionary zoning, that's one tool. I won't get into some of the details, but it's a really interesting tool that's been used at different levels to try and be a kind of a stick and carrot kind of thing for some projects in cities. A missing middle, so I showed you some of those examples. ADUs, an award for the best design project, that's kind of cool. The state needs to get its skin in the game, affordable housing and UVU campus. Yeah, I think that's a discussion we had with UVU, but look at other communities and change zoning. So that's been something we've always continued to do. So we're always looking at how are other communities implementing affordable housing policy, affordable housing zoning, different kind of ideas. Impact fees is one I talked about before. Percent of parking. So I know that that's a transportation housing connection. Is that we're as we grow as a city, we're going to have we already have a lot of parking issues, and that's been recent because of the university. And so I think that's something to be tackled continuously going forward. Street requirements. So sometimes you can allow narrow streets. It does traffic calming. It encourages more walkability. So like I said, I'm not going to read all of them. I just wanted to highlight some of the ones that stuck out to me. TOD, that's transit-oriented development. So where we have either UVX stops or the front runner station, it's a really low-hanging fruit for where to locate housing, and also try to reduce that dependence on, lower the dependence on an automobile potentially, and lower the transportation costs. And so there's that kind of option to try and encourage that. And then, yeah, tiny homes, I think, came up, and detached ADUs. Pocket neighborhoods of tiny homes, that might be an interesting thing to see here in Orem as well. But yeah, this last one, hosting more of these short events, I think that is something we're definitely looking at moving forward to kind of continue this discussion out in the community, starting with you all tonight. So I think, Kenna, I think we'll just open it up for what we wanted to do next, was just kind of have an open discussion similar to this, is where what ideas do we have? But I'll stop talking now. I don't want to hear myself talk anymore.
You can come back in here. Or you'd rather be in the park?
Oh, that's true. I could come back there now, huh? Okay.
Okay, so where do you think Orem should go with housing? You've seen
Well-
some of those things.
What I don't want is the problem to get worse. I grew up in a city, my dad was a civil engineer, and he had a consulting company that consulted with cities, and they started requiring in all new neighborhoods that a certain number of doors were in multifamily dwellings. So we have a new neighborhood over by the temple, and there should be a certain, I think we need, if that ends up being all single-family housing units, then they're not gonna be affordable. So I think you require upfront developers, and that way that when neighbors move in, they know what they're getting into. And so I think what you want to do is not make the problem worse.
I'm sorry, what does the problem worse mean?
By just saying, okay, we've got a new neighborhood, we're just like, well, the problem is that we don't have affordable housing, so let's build single-family homes, they're expensive. And there's an opportunity to provide multifamily housing in a new neighborhood.
So you're especially when it's a clean slate, right? We're starting.
It's a clean slate.
Yeah,
So,
those new neighborhoods.
I'm very interested in the middle housing. I'll just, well, give you an example. In my neighborhood, there was a fire at an LDS church, and the church decided to demolish the church and sell the property for development. And it was on 12 North and 9th West. And it would have been a great piece of property for middle housing or some type of non-single family housing. Because we have that in our neighborhood, but we need something that's, but that was not what it was. Ivory Homes bought the property and is now selling it as single family homes. But we have a need for housing that is not, like, it's not multi-million stories, but just like the little, I was gonna say, like the little duplex that was a.
What kind of a price range? I mean, when you're talking middle, help me understand what kind of a housing price.
Um,
$150,000 homes,
It's not in this market right now, but no.
I mean, you can do
It's gonna be-
you can do a tiny home for 78.
No, I'm not talking tiny homes. I'm
Okay,
talking
so-
probably
That's what I'm looking.
between 2 and 3, or,
So townhome. kind of.
yeah, but townhome is one way you can do them, but something that has a slightly higher density.
Even the picture of the quad homes, I thought that was an interesting.
Yeah,
concept.
that's what yeah.
Where you've got 4 homes on basically one plot.
Yeah, it's like the modern day fourplex. I mean, you have fourplex.
That's what I was gonna say. It sounds like the fourplexes that Orem outlawed.
Not like those, yeah. I'm thinking too, over on 8th West, there's some senior ones that Ty Riker has done that are one level, and
The home, yeah, kind of scattered around the
he
four
has
sides.
each entrance is on a different side of the building, so
Yeah.
every each direction just looks like one.
There's some there by those as well on that.
Oh, Carolyn Court, yeah.
Yep.
The 1200 south.
Most of those projects.
So
I think it would help to eliminate a lot of neighborhood angst if some of these things were developed aesthetically, so that, like, they were the cottage effect around inner courtyard kind of thing, so that they could be shown that it would be nice looking place, even though everything would be small, it would still be attractive.
There's some in Provo that you just go down, like on First South and about 9th West. There's some houses on the street, you go back, because those are deep lots, and there's a little court, and there are 2 or 3 homes back there, but it doesn't have. But I'm gonna just say one more thing quickly, one that just from the field that I work in, because I work in community action. We're not talking, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, we're not talking about those who are experiencing homelessness. Because that's a whole other issue, because for a lot of folks experiencing homelessness, they need something that's more intensive with services. To put a place where you're going to have the number of homeless individuals living together or formerly homeless, you're gonna need to have those social workers on site, those case managers. I think what we're talking about here is more like we talk about the traditional teacher, firefighter, service industry worker. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanna make that differentiation.
Somebody that makes $50,000 a year.
Yeah, so,
60,000 maybe,
so it's.
and they can afford about a $1,300–1,400 a month house.
I think developers need to get a little more creative. We owned a home in Phoenix, and our home had no backyard. It was as wide as a 2-car garage, and it was fairly long, and there was a kitchen, a living room, and 3 bedrooms upstairs. We had, on one side, we had no yard, on the other side, we had 15 feet of side yard, and we had 20 feet of front yard. There was no street down, it was just a sidewalk. It was in a planned community, but I just feel like the developer, and there were no fourplexes or new duplexes yet. We were crammed in there like a fourplex and a duplex. It's an 1,800 square foot home. But it was on a very tiny footprint.
Eagle Mountain has houses.
And they work great. I mean, I just think we think, okay, we gotta put a duplex or a fourplex or whatever. If we can encourage developers to be a little more creative around saying, how can we give someone a space where they can live, where they don't need a big yard? And it was a really a nice little neighborhood.
Do Orem zoning laws currently allow something like Mr. Lowe just described?
Sure, what's on that?
I don't even know what the density would be.
You got setback requirements. In a PRD, you've got some options. The PRD has to be a certain size.
Yeah, Grant.
Then you have a requirement of a certain amount of green space and.
I was going to jump in there, Marie. I think that's one of the barriers we see here along the Wasatch Front, is a lot of these missing middle housing types aren't allowed at all because of current zoning. They aren't allowed because of minimum lot sizes. They aren't allowed because of setbacks. They aren't allowed because of height requirements.
Yeah.
That's what I was kind of mentioning earlier. There's all these other things that have just evolved from zoning practices that prohibit these the ability for these developers to be that creative but it's also not just the zoning. Like one example is we've been running kind of a scenario. So Salt Lake City adopted this in certain areas in Salt Lake City. They adopted this overlay where you can put in like this detached mini modular home potentially, or ADU, right? And it can be a certain size. But in Orem, to run sewer, water to that, the impact fee is going to be over $10,000. And so that is already a huge cost burden for a homeowner to want to be able to do that. And so, I mean, that's a rough number, so don't quote me on that. But it's over $10,000 to run those services, and that's a separate line, right? So one of the creative ideas was, well, could we just run it off of one line for both homes, right? And could that be something we look at? But then that's a discussion with the water and sewer department. Say, hey, where are we at with capacity, right? And that's another thing we run into here in the West is and we're in a drought year. We have limited supply of water. So that's just an example. But yeah, to your point, to your example, that's something we're running into is minimum lot sizes. Orem is also, I gave the statistics, I ran it about 3 weeks ago. We only have about 18% undeveloped land in Orem. And so I think that's another thing that Orem faces is where do we put, if we're going to encourage some different housing, where do we put it? And where can we encourage it?
A lot of it is not large tracts, it's
individual
lots.
Hodgepodge places.
Yeah.
And I need to take off to another committee, but really quickly, that was the point that I was going to say is that I'm surprised there's 18%.
Well, that includes the annex, right?
Yeah, no, it's not.
It's 1%.
My point is that if we can somehow incorporate some of those smaller homes into existing neighborhoods, And then the other thing was,
I think tied to that though is a key question, because part of your biggest challenge as an elected official is the not in my backyard.
right,
Everybody says, yeah, I like that, I can support that if it's down over by the temple, but not right next door to me.
Yeah.
I don't want it in my neighborhood.
Part of it is, as soon as a neighbor, as soon as you hear the word fourplex, then you get scared. I mean, I'm looking at the neighborhood I used to live in Arizona. There's not a single fourplex in there, but how much green do you see in that neighborhood?
And it could be the same density
It's
as,
the same density, but part of it is we're not very creative around saying,
Yeah.
that was my neighbor.
Wow.
That was my vacation neighborhood. It wasn't my neighborhood.
Would your neighborhood allow a vacant lot to put 3 homes on?
I would love the property below me next to
Fourplex,
UVU.
but-
I would love it to look like that. That would be great, because they're two-story homes. And if it's affordable housing, if it's Section 8 house, that's great. What I don't want are 3 or 4-story buildings, right? So part of it is the way you describe it.
The way it's presented makes a huge difference. For example, the word cottage, that just calms me down.
it's cute.
well, yeah, that was what I was looking at, is some of those.
Yeah,
Not the tiny house, but the kind of that in between tiny home and a small home.
Yeah, those.
right. The cottage idea, something charming comes to your mind when you hear that word. So if you're presenting that, if that's the description for that particular kind of setting, I think that would help.
One of the other lines on Grant's presentation was reinvesting in open neighborhoods. And I would like to explore that. Steve, you and I had that discussion.
Yeah.
a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I gotta take off.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Jeff.
Good to be
Thanks,
with
Jeff.
One of the things that Utah County just did is, a lot of cities require minimum, main floor size. And I don't know what ordinance is 800 or 700, 800 square feet, or some places, some South County cities, it was 1,500 square feet. That was your main level. And the state legislature this last session said you cannot make it more than 1,000 square feet on your main level. They're trying to bring that back down. Well, Utah County just approved an ordinance eliminating a minimum main floor size. And letting it be dictated by the building code, because the building code will dictate that bedrooms or rooms that people sleep in, bedrooms would have to be a certain size, you have to have a window and a closet or whatever. But the building codes dictate it, rather than saying in an unincorporated Utah County, your main level has to be X number of square feet, which will open up a lot of possibilities, but it is an unincorporated Utah County and there's not a ton of development out there.
But if your lot sizes are still fairly large,
Yeah,
putting a tiny home on an expensive lot is still gonna be a challenge. So you need to have the collaborative development on.
you need to inherit a lot.
Or you just have some flexibility on what you want.
But the reason one of the reasons, because I sit on the planning commission, it's one of the reasons we did it, is to set it, to say, hey, it's possible to do this and hopefully encourage cities to do.
Yeah.
Think about that, because the example I gave in the planning commission, Kenna and I are dear friends. Maybe Kenna and I want to live on lots and have our horses and stuff, but we only want to have 800 square foot houses. I don't know if you want horses, well, I don't know.
Lots of cats.
Yeah. No cats, no cats. But it's just, it limited our flexibility, and I think it increases flexibility by reducing those types of requirements.
Grant, is there a way to, of that remaining developable land? Is there a way to kind of categorize that in terms of?
We can, and what that also includes, that 18% includes existing orchard land. So, because that is potentially developable, but we can break that down. And it says like vacant land versus orchard versus, other land.
The lots down there that are the conservation lots.
Yeah, there are some conservation areas down there in the southwest area. Yeah.
You can't build anything on those.
and
No, those
there's
are,
orchard conservation too.
yeah, there's one
off
orchard one
APs.
as well.
Yeah.
Managed property.
Yeah, and another interesting breakdown we're looking to do is at the national level, you've seen some cities It's been kind of misconstrued a little bit that they're getting rid of single family zones, but they're taking away the de facto standard that that all residential areas have to be single family homes only. And so there's already 3 or 4 cities that have adopted this, and it's but I wanted to pull up this example here that we're looking at some case studies locally of where we see you see these, this is 2 twin homes or duplexes. They don't look like that, but they are. And this is actually 1 lot. So I drove past this a while ago, and I was like, wait a second, that looked like 2 homes, but it's actually 4 units. What do you think? How big do you think this lot is? Just a guess.
Half acre.
That's bingo, exactly half acre. And so, so if we zoom back out,
Price.
I
did read it.
There's another hitter in
You know,
there.
you can become a developer now. That's
Yeah.
a prize.
Those 2 years on the city council, Mark, paid off.
Yeah.
so you're spot on, Mark. I went and looked this up. It's got an access little thing. There's got the parking area, but it's half acre, 4 units. And so what we've kind of started to research is because we have deep lot questions every single week. There's lots in Orem that qualify for deep lots. Could that be an opportunity to encourage something like this in the future, pending discussion and stuff like that, on a larger deep lot that has the room to encourage some kind of like miniature town 2-unit townhome. Townhomes are single family home housing units. They are not multifamily. They are higher density, but they are still a single unit, right? And so is that an opportunity, something like that? Just so that's an example, because I saw this study and I'm like, wait, those look really nice. And I didn't look at the tax, stuff like that. I should, because it is in holiday too. So you already know maybe that a certain level that they are more expensive. But like I just saw that looks really nice, fits in the neighborhood well. It didn't stick it out. It stuck out more because I was like, wait a second, that's 4 units. And I was just blown away that 4 units on half an acre. That's technically a lot, higher density. What is that? That's 4 units per half acre, so 8 units per acre.
Can I give you another example? I grew up in a city where there was an army barracks where they built little tiny homes in the 40s and 50s. They were about 1,000 square feet, but they were on lots that were like 1/3 of an acre. And what the city allowed is they allowed someone to come in and buy 2 lots and split them 3 ways. So they put 3 homes on 2 lots, but the homes were longer now than in these deeper lots. And you go on, these homes are beautiful. I mean, they're probably not mid, they're more high end, but they've kind of taken this real, I see some of these lots in Orem around, mainly on the 400, 800 on the main driveways that are kind of small and really old. But if you could buy 2 of those lots and make it into 3, you didn't have to worry about the setbacks.
Yeah.
You could do some really beautiful things.
Yeah.
But we just don't have these creative examples of how to.
And those things become good for like water conservation too, right? You're watering a lot less grass and filling it
The
with,
front lawn's 12 feet long, the side yard is 4 feet on each side, and so yeah, absolutely. The backyard is mostly place to park or something like that.
My.
Grant, can I share my screen?
I know you guys are trying
yeah,
to
sorry.
fit more people in here. However, I'm worried about the drought. It's like, okay, yeah, we could fit more people in here, but even if you don't give them a yard, they're taking a shower, I just don't know. I mean, I think we need to look at 2 things and say, okay, should we fit more people? Just because we
Let me
can.
share an interesting stat. So during the winter, Orem City uses about 16 million gallons of water a day. During the summer, we use almost 65 million gallons of water a day, 60 million gallons of water a day.
I love my half acre.
That's because of landscape. so the issue is if instead of one house, few people with a big yard, you have 3 small houses, you're gonna use less water if the landscaping is much more.
Yeah. Yeah, the water inside the home is
It's
far
amazing how
less.
much we use to keep the place. Really a lot.
Well, I get it, because trust me, I get my water bill.
Yeah.
Part of my, you know, like a third of my yard, actually has orchard and stuff, fruit
Yeah.
trees and things. And I don't water that, looks like the face of the moon, except where my trees are. But, you know, I just.
One thing I was gonna say
Yeah,
for,
love the yard.
Of where we are in Western water.
one thing I was gonna say, based on what Murray was saying, and this is my neighborhood now, I live right at 400 North, 200 East, so just right here, is there's, in a lot of these older neighborhoods, you see these really large corner lots that are generally, to be honest, in the older neighborhoods, they struggle to be kept up, to be honest. And if I did I don't know what time of year this is.
Corner lots, so be careful where you go with it.
Yeah, so here's one, for example, that this home has always struggled to be kept up
Yes.
nicely.
I'm talking about your lot.
And it's a huge lot. I don't know what the size of that lot is, but it's big. But if you drive through Orem, and I've done it enough, there isn't just one of these corners. There's quite a few of these types of corner lots that potentially could easily be what Murray's talking about and what Grant showed.
Readjust the home.
Yeah, exactly.
On it.
Yeah, and honestly, it strengthens probably the neighborhood to have, you know, a home like that. I don't know who lives here, so there's no commentary on anybody here. But most people in a neighborhood like this are gonna struggle to keep that size of a yard up to standards. However, there's far less yard to take care of and a few more people that are living in a more big, potentially more full.
So it's like Habitat had a house donated in Stevens neighborhood, not too far from Stephen. And it has a huge lot. And we asked the city if we could, build on the back, another lot, and they wouldn't let us. And it was very close, but it didn't work. And it would have been
Was
really
it
nice.
because of the setbacks? I mean, if you could have said, we're gonna have less green on this
Right.
property
Yeah.
and less
Us
setbacks, it
bringing
would have
would've-
worked.
And another family, and we weren't able to.
We need to change the setbacks.
Well, then
There's an issue here.
there's 2 sides. to
There's a
that.
lot just like that.
There are some,
Park.
if it's desirable, it works out fine, but there can also be some bad neighbors.
Oh, for
The
sure.
Closer setbacks make it really problematic.
Right.
You know, and so I think the question that I have, and I like your thoughts and ideas. Would we see us being able to change setbacks and say, now you can put 2 homes on a lot instead of 1?
Or 3 on 2 lots or
Three
whatever.
on 2, given that if it's at least a 1/3 acre or a half
Right.
acre, then you can do it. Would that apply throughout the city, or do you kind of focus on certain parts of the city? Like, would that fit in your neighborhood as opposed to in Geneva, or as opposed to in some of the other ones that already have fairly small, small footprints? Or is that something that you would wide open to say, hey, any vacant lot? And just thinking out loud is then you also have some of these older homes, there's a little bit of an incentive where the owner may tear down the old home and put up two nicer homes instead, which could be good or bad, but I mean, what's your thought? Is that something you think would fly with?
Well, I've always thought that Orem needed to reinvent itself. And I first came here 50 years ago when I was a 10-year-old boy, right? And Orem was a farm. It didn't even look like a city. And it's kind of, still doesn't look like a city. It just has grown in such a weird way, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been orchard by orchard that sells out,
Yeah.
right?
But when you look at big cities across America, across North America, they eventually turn over. And the question is, are you gonna let it happen organically, or do you want to make it plan? And I think if you make it plan, you're gonna get a better outcome. So I don't know if you specific answer your question, but I think if we had some concrete plans, that would be better than just letting each developer decide on each property what they're gonna do.
I agree. I really like the idea of having plans. And I lived in another country where they had something called a granny plat, which was kind of what we've talked about, these smaller homes, you know, or the side of a property. And they were wonderful because there were requirements and building constraints around those. So they stayed beautiful, but I love the plan. And I also, as you make a plan, like looking citywide, sometimes feel like lots of things get on this looking citywide and having a citywide plan.
Yeah. I saw a thing on the news the other night about Salt Lake, I think it was Salt Lake, somewhere out there, the tiny home thing,
Right.
where they were making a whole development that was gonna be tiny homes.
Oh, yeah.
And that looked pretty cool. I mean, if you're gonna do it.
And you can do some fun design development things.
So what is this annex thing you're talking about? Is it something that could be
Well,
done there?
So here's the challenge with over in the Temple area. Is when that was proposed to be annexed, there had to be a decision made on what the land use would be so that the utilities could be sized. How big of a water line, how big of a sewer line. And they did it based on number of units, number of, what do we call it?
ERUs.
ERUs.
Yeah, developed residential units.
Yes.
So they said, okay, we can handle so many units based on the size of the capacity and the pump stations to get the sewer uphill to go to the sewer treatment plant. And so the master plan was planned out that on the west side of Geneva Road would be an option for some higher density housing on the corner, and they were actually paying for a lot of the development and some commercial development. And then on the other side would be developed, because at the time, the outcry was we want to keep this low density residential. It's farming area. We've got farms. We've got what's remaining of Cherry Hill. We've got a number of conservation areas. So the overwhelming majority was to say, keep that part single family residential. And that's how it was planned from a utility standpoint and how it was master planned from that standpoint. So now to go back, and we had several developers that came and said, we'd like to convert it to twin homes. And we said, okay, well, if you do that, that means you get the units, but your neighbors don't, because you've used up all the developable units. And so that's been part of the challenge is the long range planning based on the timing was to say, that's how we envisioned that part of the city, was to keep it rural, to let it be one of the last places that you can go see farming and you can go see a rural feel that creates what Orem may have used to have somewhat been. So
agree with that.
So that was the vision and the plan. But now you go back and I don't know what it would cost to, put a whole new sewer and water line kind of system in.
About 13 million, oh, no, it's a tank, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we should wipe out every orchard. Guys, we need to feed ourselves.
But that's where I come back to. I think one of the biggest challenges is everyone I talk to will say, yeah, we need more affordable housing. We definitely do. Say, okay, are you okay with it right next to you? No, it needs to be on the west side of the freeway, or it needs to be.
Okay,
I'm okay
with it in my backyard.
We got
To
it.
be real honest.
I am too. I'm okay with my neighborhood. Trust me.
But the only thing is I don't want 3 or 4 story building there.
Yeah.
Right? I'm fine with
Two-story.
affordable.
They had 8 units per acre.
Well, and you
12.
want enough parking, so they don't have to park on the
Yeah.
street front.
Yeah.
And you want the front.
What I think is, as you do, I mean, most people, when you do like the survey research, their values would say, yeah, I agree with this. I think there should be housing to meet different income levels. Most people have that value. And once we agree on that, hey, there should be something done, then we start talking through, well, what are the holdups? It is, no design standards, right? They just throw up.
Yeah, that's my problem. You gotta have design standards.
Yeah, and so, but that's what I think you get into the really great conversations of what really then becomes the holdup. It's making sure there's sufficient parking. It's making sure that there's design standards. It's making sure that, whatever those issues are. And we get beyond the discussion of should there or shouldn't there be. And because most people will say, yeah, I think there should be. There will be some that say, no more, stop it. But most say, let's do something, but there are concerns. And when we start really diving into the concerns, that's when we can have productive conversations about how to mitigate that or this.
I think one other consideration would be, we're viewing this from our perspective, and our perspective as we grew up in a house with a nice large yard to let kids grow and play. My interaction with younger kids that are getting married they don't want a big yard.
Yeah, really.
Not yet.
Well, that was the case with my kids, and as soon as my kids, I have 3 kids, as soon as they had a child, all 3 of them, within 6 months of having a child, they moved from apartment.
You change, exactly.
And
Their perspective changed as soon as they had
And
kids.
so I think tied to that though is that there are different stages which require, and I think part of that is to look at what do current people want. When you become a senior, like my parents, you need your kids to mow lawns. You can't mow them anymore. And you're looking, say, what do I do with this big 4,000 square foot home when it's just me and we can't even go into the basement? So I think there are some design aspects that could be also based on life stages, maybe.
Yeah, because that's really one of the things in a lot of the housing things that we go to. It's called, housing for life.
Right.
And, so that there's an opportunity through your whole housing stages. And Orem doesn't have that, right?
We don't have any 55 plus communities, right?
Right. I mean, it's very limiting, especially on the senior. I was just with our senior center person today, and she's like, so sad that these seniors keep coming to me and saying they can't afford their housing, or they can't find housing, or they can't, it's really kind of sad. Well, I think this has been a good discussion. We could go on forever. I don't know if you guys wanna keep going.
Can I
or-
say something?
Cause it just,
My brother-in-law, who is not great mentally, up in Washington, he has an apartment it's an old house. It's a very well-kept house. And I don't know how many apartments are in that house, but it's a really nice apartment. And so there's gotta be 4 in that big old house. And I bet you we got some places in Orem that could be done. I mean, I don't know who would do it, who would buy it, who would revisit that whole thing and make it, but I mean, the apartment is really nice. It's something he can afford. And that would be something that, I mean, really, truly a couple could live there easily. It's a 1-bedroom apartment that he's got. But they could even manage to squeak a baby in there.
Is it all one unit?
It's one big old
Yeah,
house,
okay,
and
okay.
it is,
Like the
it has.
McEwen Mansion.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we have some spots in Orem that we could finagle.
Yeah.
Well, there's houses in Provo that are like that. Plenty of them.
What?
Some not so good, some good.
I was just thinking that if I could have a takeaway from this as a neighborhood representative, would be to encourage the staff and the city council to look at some of these options about aesthetics and flexibility in the zoning. So we can do like what Murray's talking about here.
In that medium sector.
In that medium sector, what you're talking about too, because we're so constrained by our zoning ordinance right now. We have some good things in like senior overlay and things like that. We have the accessory dwelling units, which we had before the state law, but I would like to see encourage a look at some more flexibility on that.
And I encourage good design.
Yeah, that's one component.
Absolutely. If you don't want the neighborhoods up in arms, if you present good design, that will help it.
now when I was director of Habitat, the first thing Louis Billings, was the mayor of Provo, said to me, we don't mind having Habitat in our community, but can you stop building boxes with pop outs? And I think of that, 20 years later, I think he was just, basically saying design fit into the neighborhood. That they don't stand out as good for, the low income housing, but they're, that they don't, and I always think of how when people talk about design, just to stop building boxes of pop outs.
But isn't design a little bit in the eye of the beholder?
Yeah, that too.
I mean, some people really like pink houses.
Yes. I see
Some
that.
people really like bright blue cabins.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
rainbow
And
fence.
it's tough to say, okay,
Go back.
as long as it's within my design standards.
Yeah.
Okay.
One interesting thing too with the, whether we ever go down the detached unit, you know, like when we did research, we did a landlord licensing program, I think many of you know. When we did research on apartment, we did police calls based on type of rental unit, right? So we know based on type of rental unit, how many police calls. The fewest were basic apartments, because generally the owners live in there and they're not gonna put up with whatever it is that's happening.
Owner occupied.
Owner occupied, right? And this obviously can become the issue, but when you think of these detached units, my guess is if we ever did that, and I don't even know if we're not having any serious conversations about it right now, is it would be the same thing. The owner has to still be living in Wayne home. Those become less problematic because the owner is dealing with the issues because they're not gonna allow it to continue. So when we went through the spectrum, that was the lease. And then, and if you're taking on a per unit basis, the next lease was actually was large apartment complexes. Far less police calls. And the reason is,
That were owned by large.
yes, exactly. You
They
take
were
like,
all owned by one owner.
yes, all owned by owner, because there's professional management on site. Usually if there's an issue between two tenants, the city doesn't become the property manager, which is what happens in single family rentals. We'll get to that, but they call the property manager who's on site.
He
The
is
land-
property management.
Yeah, exactly. So these are usually the professionally managed ones. These are the larger ones, right?
The owners.
Landscaping, almost always done by a professional contractor. You're not dealing with landscaping issues at the apartments at University Place, or, take quite a few of those other ones. So our police calls are way down, but you continue to move down the spectrum, and then, so you take a unit in a large apartment complex, and then a single family rental, 10 times more likely to get a call from the police department a year on a single family rental. You're dealing with landscaping issues, because now it's up to the individual to take care of the yard, and they may or may not.
If they don't water, they save money on the water.
Exactly, yeah, and the owner may or may not be around, may or may not have an interest. If there's a neighbor who's having an issue with that property, they don't know who the owner is, so they call 911 to take care of those problems, right? So the closer you get the owner to the rental, you have far less issues. Or when there's shared ownership, there's far less issues. We even have far less in a duplex or a fourplex, because usually it's owned by the same owner. So if I have my issue, my landlord is their landlord, I call my landlord, they take care of the issue. The police doesn't become, again, the property manager. So when you think of rentals, the types of rentals that people usually struggle with are the kinds that are, for us, are actually probably the best for services, because we're not dealing with landscaping issues, we're not dealing with tenant disputes. The ones that are the kind of sneak through and become our biggest challenges just from services are the single family rentals, because again, that's when they're on their own to take care of landscaping. When the neighbor has to call them, they don't know who the owner is, they don't know who to call, they call 911. So it's really interesting to think of rentals and what types reduce the needs for family services or for city services.
The biggest challenge with those is still the parking issue.
Absolutely,
You know,
absolutely. Yep, I totally agree with that. In fact, we just dealt with one in Geneva, down the Access Apartments, and you're just west of University. UVU finally came to the table, and they're allowing them now to use UVU parking overnight to take care of this issue that was pushing into the neighborhood.
Yeah, nothing worse than people walking across Geneva Road.
Yeah.
Parking on it.
Yeah, so UVU has this west campus that's huge where the National Guard is, and from 5 on, it was empty, right? All the while, they're not allowing anybody to park there, and everybody's going everywhere else. And finally, in the conversation with UVU, Jamie and UVU said, these are your students. I mean, you want them living close to campus, help us solve the problem as well. And that's when UVU finally came and said, yeah, use this parking overnight. And it makes a ton of sense.
Nobody's using it tonight.
Exactly. So, yeah, you have to solve that problem, no doubt.
Well, any other comments? This has been a great discussion.
Maybe only that when new things are going to be built, that there does have to be some serious regulation on having enough parking
Yeah.
for however many people
Yeah.
you think you're building that for.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I know that's been a conversation we've been having recently for sure. So, yeah.
For years on the.
Yeah.
You probably knew where cars were invented. Don't put your horse in front of my
I mean,
house.
it always starts with every developer says, I've done my own study,
Yeah.
this is the parking, and then the city saying, we've done our studies and it looks different. And they obviously, that's a huge cost to them, and they see it as nothing but a cost because they don't make any money on it. So it's always this battle, but yeah, you've
We
seen
got
it
a,
more
we
than
got
me.
a complaint, a code complaint the other day that the neighbors had painted their curb red. So they
The
can't.
neighbors did not.
So we can't park the car. The neighbors are bad because they.
I'm gonna do that.
Why didn't I do that? Well, thank you very much. Grant, do you have anything else?
I don't think so. I was just trying to show, I was sharing where the senior overlay was. That's on the orem.org/maps. You can go to the Where I Live map. You can turn on the zoning. You can see where the overlays are. Just showing that the overlays are only in certain areas. So that is definitely like one of the suggestions we could say is we're looking at these other cities who've already done this. Maybe there's only a certain part of the city where we allow an overlay for a corner lot that we talked about, like Steven's idea, this corner lot idea. Maybe the deep lots that are a certain size. We've as a planning staff have already come up with the ideas, or want to talk about them. Like one example is for townhomes and twin homes, the minimum size is 1.5 acres, and there's not a lot of lots around the Orem that are that big anymore. And the other thing is it allows up to a certain density, but that's in some cases the neighborhood feels that's too much of an impact. And so maybe there's a smaller size, like the one I showed in Salt Lake County. Maybe there's a 1/2 acre to 1 acre, and then 1 acre to 1.5 acres. And we target those in certain areas of the city, and they can allow up to a certain density, right? And we would, through this discussion process, determine, hey, what is that appropriate size? Is it two like miniature brownstone kind of esque townhomes? Is it a twin home? Is it a quadplex? Is it that last home I showed you is in Salt Lake down the street from where I still live in Salt Lake? So, and what's happened in Salt Lake City is with the Plat of Zion, the lots were so long that the natural evolution was exactly what Murray said, is people just divided up these lots arbitrarily and just organically, and you have 2 or 3 homes on these lots now, and it's kind of created this interesting fabric of homes and different types of homes. So that home I showed on the last screen share, I think it has 4 to 6 units in it of apartments, but it looks like a home from the outside. So it's that kind of quadplex example I shared from the slides. So I think the last thing I want to share is if any of you are interested in the slides, I'm happy to share them. I'll send them to Kenna. So.
That'd be great. Well, thank you. This has been a really good discussion. So I think we'll probably, hopefully, be doing some more charrettes, kind of like we talked about, bringing more people in to talk about this. We're thinking about maybe creating a housing task force as well. I don't know what that's going to look like. That's just a discussion that's out there right now to really tackle this, because some of the numbers that we've seen as of late during the pandemic, rent in this community has gone up 66%.
Oh, I'm not raising mine enough. We need to be
Yeah.
I don't raise my rents.
It's gone up 60%.
Robert Spelog, who's a design and bank economist, said that in our.
Yeah, the median house price, I don't know if you're on, but the median house price in Utah is almost 500,000. Which is crazy to me.
And you can't buy anything now with planning to make it a rental. It's just because you gotta charge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I heard the other day, you hire a school teacher and they say, great, work for you, and they come to try to buy a home in the community, and they can't afford to live there.
Yeah.
And so they have to say, sorry, I can't work there. Idaho has a school district that shut down today.
Same with police officers,
They
firefighters.
just said, we don't have teachers, we don't have substitute teachers, we can't do school, we're closing. The whole school district on Idaho.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, before we leave, does anyone have any concerns that they would like to?
I had a couple that I was asked to bring up.
Okay, all right, Margaret.
One was residents wanted to know when the nice lights will be finished on 800 North down toward the canyon. They abruptly ended, and the word was, well, we'll wait till after we get the road road fixed, but the road's been done quite some time and the lights have not been put in.
Okay, I'll ask about that.
It could be an interesting neighborhood too. I think we've got a couple of spots in our neighborhoods that are still waiting for lights too.
I'll check on the lights.
Street lights general.
Maybe
And then the other one that I got was on 8th East. They resurfaced along 8th East, but the manhole covers are lower than the resurfacing. And so now we've got little dips, little bangs all the way through.
Designed potholes.
Speed potholes.
Yeah, designed potholes.
All right, I'll check on those, Mark.
Is that, they liked it or did they?
No, they do not like that. No.
I don't know how to do that. Can't-
So anyway, those were my two
All
things
right.
that I got from people.
Okay, good feedback.
Yeah, anything else? All
Okay,
right, well, we'll see you. Thank you.
thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. One other thing, you guys, I
Thanks, everyone.
rather meet online.
this was nice.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's variety's good.
Okay,
And with this
We get another
ability, this
outbreak,
actually
yeah,
worked out pretty good.
Eventually.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your service. We appreciate it. And we'll be in touch. If you have any problems, issues, that you're hearing from your neighborhoods, please let me know.
I think you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you.
I'll give you a standing ovation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Stop.
So I appreciate that, but if we could do anything, we're here, we want to make neighborhoods better, that's our whole goal. So if you have any ideas, anything that you think we should be doing, let me know. It's, it's hard to get around all my districts, see what's going on, so thank you very
Okay,
much.
thanks Sunday, thanks Margaret.
Thanks, you
Thanks,
guys.
Grant.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.